Thank you. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah, great. I'll read a few from my book, which just published, and then a longer piece from a new work that I'm just beginning. This is a title poem called Har Vacui, written sort of at the behest of a response that I felt I needed to make when my father passed away in 2001. You see there's nothing left to do but gawk at the unblocked stars and look back at our torn scrap of black map awkwardly for a little too long, startled. You see there's nothing left to see, which makes the wind worse, makes me worry the river in my palm more until it hurts. You see over there, your children have taken the house apart, plank by plank, and have thrown it in the water, leaving a yellowed grass patch as big and blank as your absence. Your daughter has bartered your livestock for a golden ring. She has hung your bathrobe in a hanging tree and sat beneath it to weep in the potter's field. In her eye, you are a scarecrow on fire. You have written your diary with a burnt goose quill and left us to fill in the space in the margins. You see, your daughter of summer names you an orange tree. In her hair, she ties henna blossoms with a fine scarlet thread she spins from your gloves, but it is not enough. The rain has a home in the hollows of our dark cloaks. I chalk my number on a crow's wing and release him into a mellowing year already broken, my pockets packed with dirt. I walk barefoot towards the mirror where you appear before me. Here is our elegy of twine and rotten tooth. Here is a bit of hair fresh from the root of my head. I have brought you a wreath of laurel to eat at your leisure, to sit and eat in your settled melancholy. I have brought you the smell of bananas and sunlight. In my cupped hand, Father, you can hear your blue macaw calling from the acorn tree. These charred acres you have created. Your hermitage I will inherit in the pages of my most secret book. A train writes its way like a dotted line through the white valley. There's ash in the air as I go forth in daylight, as I wade home at even song. The moon, vibrant as a rung bell, releases birds from my mouth. In my hand I hold a tuning fork and clang the weather vane. I strike my hand on the garden wall and am returned a dull sound. Your voice breaks through the clouds, falls on my ear where I leave it unbroken. What shelter shall I assemble against this? Could I hammer a narrow boat from this old barn's frame? Could I assemble an empty boat from this old hammered frame? Could I frame an empty boat for this old body's frame? I could frame an empty body in this old broken frame. Shall I break an old body to fit this narrow old frame? This next poem is called The Orchard of Orange Trees. It's the oldest poem in the book. I wrote it after several years after I left Florida, and it's sort of the only account of my life there that's made its way into poetry. The orange trees were warm. What sounded like a chainsaw was in the distance, cutting a hole in the air. It was night, so the noise was louder and traveling quickly through the leaves. My neighbor and I were hunting in an orchard a mile from his house for his black Labrador, missing 4 nights, though on the 3rd I thought I saw him standing in the center of the road. But then I looked again and he was not there, only a halo from the street lamp and the dim repeated forms of mailboxes before the road dead ends, with vacant fields where teenagers throw their beer cans before stealing in through bedroom windows. My neighbor called a name and the sound branched in the air surrounding us. With a flashlight, he scanned the roads, though it only shone 20 feet or so before the darkness washed back out of the trees. He scanned the roads, and they were long, unlit corridors. It was August, and almost 5 a.m. The earth was hot. And drinking since midnight, the noise made me uneasy. We headed towards it, slowly, the way you walk into a dark room and feel for the wall. But sometimes it isn't there. He forgot to latch the gate, and the dog escaped into the receding field of the night. That had been 4 days ago. Perhaps he fell into the river, and the current pulled him kicking through one of the culvert pipes. Perhaps a car struck him, and he lay down, moaning, an empty, reverberating sound that no one could hear. They say if they don't reappear after 3 days, they never will, and I believe that. Though I saw something in the road, it wasn't him. We had been drinking and the oranges were wet, incandescent like lanterns strung in the branches. They buzzed there with moths and flies, drawn there because the body instinctively turns towards light, even when it can kill you or destroy your eyes. I know this because when I looked away, the air wavered like it does when you're sitting in the dark, waiting, and you rise and walk out into a field white with sunlight. We walked, and the wind moved through us as if our bodies were hollow, and in the distance was a noise that made me uneasy. Though I did not say this, I wanted to. I knew the dog was dead. It had been 4 days, and we were walking through a maze of trees that kept closing behind us. Something stirred high in the leaves, but I could not see it. My neighbor said, "Fruit bat," and "harmless." They swoop for insects, then turn on their wings and sail into the air. Sometimes at night when they feed in the neighborhoods, they slam into windows. And glass is not only beautiful, it's invisible, and the body may break, but the radar passes right through. Some nights too, the river's humid scent floods the house, and you wake up smelling like musk, a pile of old clothes dug out of the earth. It was August, and the ground was hot even after the sun sank like an orange in a dark lake. In Florida, you never leave your dog tied up in your backyard. As soon as you're sewn into your cocoon of sleep, the alligator will lumber out of the river onto your lawn. He'll take your dog right from the chain. This sounds unreal, but I know it's true. On weekends, teenagers get drunk and haul their canoes into the river that thins like a vein and winds to the orchard. They bring rifles and lights, and when an alligator surfaces, he'll look straight at them, blind, paralyzed, unable to submerge. Some nights, rifle shots echo through the trees. I step outside, but I do not see them. The street dead ends in a vacant field. The street lamps have halos, but only in the summer fog. The light flashed into the empty rooms of the orchard, and I felt uneasy, like when I stretch out my hand in the dark and it isn't there. My neighbor kept calling for his dog. He had disappeared and could not hear us. On the 3rd day, I saw something, but it wasn't him. I had been drinking. The air smelled of musk, of leaves decaying. The earth was full of August. We were lost, and the ground was so dark it was like wading through water. My legs heavy, completely immersed, and a noise traveled over the surface. It was only an irrigation pump in the distance flooding one field and draining another. Though I did not know this, I was there. So I can say one or two things. The alligators sink to the bottom and the current washes them downstream, though in the morning you can find large bands of blood in the water, and the grass turns red by noon, but it's gone after a few days, especially if it storms. The weather called for rain and I welcomed it. Lanterns hung in the branches humming over our heads. I wanted to pull one down, hold it in my palms, but I was exhausted, lost in the middle of August. I thought, lie down and forget all this. I knew the dog was dead, but I don't know how. We found him an hour later in a ditch in the orchard. He was large and swollen, almost the size of a calf, and unrecognizable. That's how a body rises after 4 days, but I did not say that. My neighbor stood, shifting his flashlight, the field draining in the distance, the morning slowly focusing, as if gauze were being peeled off the sky. We were slowly focusing, as if looking at something we could not remember, as if looking at something we did not care to remember. And I'll read one longer work from a new manuscript. This is called, the manuscript's called The Journal of X, and all you really need to know about it is that it's written by somebody who thinks he may be the last person on Earth. And it's not sure if the rapture has actually occurred, but suddenly one day he's woken up and everybody has vanished. The title is simply 6.33, which is the number of the journal entry. I was pulled on a wagon through the snow, through the gates of my demonic post-exilic city, and in the sky what I saw was fear, and at the end a bright light, and my face was there. Among the ruins was a radio that played one song. The subaltern huddled in rags under a freeway clover where the city's exercised conscience. An alien presence in my mind kept speaking to me in a strange language about responsibility and love, which are harder to swallow than finely granulated bits of cement. Loving another person requires a sacrifice, especially if that person is a statue. Isn't this how it was meant to be? The long journey from happiness would start at the outskirts, where the first apartment blocks formed a perimeter wall, and there above you, tumbling up from the center, a roaring whirlwind of a great green fire, enfolding on itself, devouring the dark sky, and your brain cracked with electricity. You fumbled for the buttons of your shirt, desperate to shed your clothing, when from an unfathomable depth of space rose the harmonious song of children that spread over the fields, a dawn chorus you continue to hear for the rest of your life. No, it would not be like this. Simpler, a mere residue of a former exuberance and flowered intricacy that could no longer be reconstructed. I was pulled on a wagon through my demonic post-exilic city, white and luminous decrepitude like cocaine. Time had stopped moving as I moved through it. The original abattoir was no longer a dream, but a diorama a child somewhere long ago had built in his garden. And I saw where the deracinated crowds had once slept in the public squares, with no respect for tradition, had bathed in the fountains, splashing water on each other. The nude bodies reenacted a Roman mural destroyed by bleach and machete. These and other images would make their way into memory and later into the pages of an eelskin notebook. Everyone was gone because I missed them. My catatonic father had not yet been born from his glass coffin. My Doberman looked back at me with something approaching regret and with fur smelling of the decay of seaweed. As I wrote, little flakes of skin fell off me. It was clear the Muslim in front of the hospital was an apparition or post-historical. The sign pointed to a tombstone. Then I surmised when I looked away the sign was a tombstone, not a birthing ward. The radio played one song loudly in a foreign language. It made the leaves rustle, but other than that, no effect. After 2 nights, a digression emerged in the road like a miracle. I passed it by because I didn't believe in it. The digression led to the sewer. I had a job to do. Nothing, not even fascination, could stop me. The bombers were painted with rainbows and given schoolgirls' names before they ascended into the nucleus of a dust-colored cumulus cloud. I quickly went to sketch this in my book. That way I could refer to it later in the middle of the night, but it was already there, altered. I sketched it over a drawing of a skyscraper concealed in fog. That was yesterday. Good grief. A current of remorse moves through the city and can be heard even in sleep, or when you place 2 hands over your ears, screamed. I counted backwards from 0 until the numbers were imaginary, and my tiny wagon stopped in front of a bank's window. It held an aquarium with an angelfish swimming around in circles with half its dorsal fin out of the evaporating water. It was inedible. Money was also useless because it was too dirty to eat and it burned too fast. Flowers filled the stomach. As I rode, 2 twin boys ran after, asking, "Are you my father? Are you my father?" My guilt metastasized in strange ways, sometimes as cancer, sometimes as an uncontrollable torrent of emotion that ended in marriage. The girl I loved was a mute and was never able to tell me she loved me, at least not in a way I could comprehend. I learned to stop speaking with my hands. Whatever I touched fossilized. Look at the sorrow in this statue. The wagon rattled over cobblestone. Inside, I loved my city, but it thought I was Jeremiah or a traitor. When the snow fell through a hole in the crumbling planetarium's dome, a curling double helix smoke trail of startled bats poured out into the skyline. I wrote these words too, but they were unsatisfying, like the color gray or lamb. The woman who would become my mother found me riding in a red wagon, just like this one, pulled through the streets by a sheepdog. When she lifted me into the sky for the first time, it was my primal scene, one I would spend my life trying to repeat for that same level of spontaneous wonder. Her face was brilliant, pixelated, and filled with a million crystals of ice. What I saw was fear, and bright, unholy fire in my eyes was there. She could see it too, even as she was holding her suitcase, and once again as she lay dying. Neither the poets nor the doctors could help her pain. Even morphine was painful. In my demonic post-exilic city, I'd come to a calm decision, or I had come to nothing. It was hard to tell which was which. My map was old, the edges turning back into bark, and the ink into rivulets of water that washed off into my hands. Arrows pointed in several directions, which meant the city couldn't be summarized without turning into a foul blot. I pried one off, and beneath it was another arrow's eroded shadow pointing the wrong way. Certainty is the result of a dead semiotics, and this could be true on any other day, even when your feet lead you downhill to a small abandoned woodshop filled with toys. One day my father would be born, and from that moment everything I owned would belong to him, my whole life a simulacrum of a life elsewhere. I was never much to begin with. I saw these words written on my hand, by whom I don't know, but they seemed fitting enough for the moment, seemed to speak a certain wisdom that was hard to resist. I came to a point. The next street over might be called Violence, which with a turn and a number of switchbacks might lead to an elegy, or maybe worse. Perhaps the structure was a series of multiplying crystals that we imagined on a clear morning when we knew what we wanted, what we had to have more than all else was taken from us. Let's agree this is a purple maple. Let's agree the city's reservoir is too polluted to swim in. Let's agree the future car wreck will occur here, but the couple will by grace survive their wounds. At some point, we said this, even if the words were never uttered. The war was unrequited. Love had become a discourse too heavy to shoulder or bear alone. It was bound, carried like a sex offender over the suspension bridge, thrown into the black harbor, to give shelter, to keep, to love in secret, but to stay moving like sleepwalking, the body in the trance of the mind moving forward, hands skimming a pocked wall outward to a courtyard single bench, lit yellow from above by a sodium light. I did not expect to find donkeys, but here was one trotting beside me, lackadaisical, as if this were the Casbah, and the denouement had already happened, which it had. Not even the poor could outlive the rapture, and so after pleasure was reduced to the shape of a key, who would inherit it? The landfill, the paltry wristwatches, the stray dogs, or even the sick city, from my city of rotting horses, roses, remorse, which in moments when I was far away from myself in the furthest exile of sleep, I wept. I slept in an attic of an A-frame that stood at a road's end like a monument to an alphabet no longer extant. The top window crested the branches, a widow's peak, and every day I surveyed the theater of crumbling buildings not 10 kilometers away and watched the extraordinary dark color of malaria settle each evening. When I felt most lost, I checked in my journal to see where I was and how far I had come. The journal continued to write itself at the exact speed I read it. Logically, it could never predict my future whereabouts. It is easier just to have been lied to in your own language, or to be truly wretched without the kindness attached. The last empty page could have been Marais' sordid bathtub, but to be blank. The city continued to unfold laterally in fractals forever under construction, each such as a river or a tunnel or a telescope where at the end a corpse waited seed-like. If only I could carry all in my wagon. The radio ran out of music. I had no clue how long I had been traveling. Neither time nor distance mattered. Sleep seemed like the most natural response to the world, either that or killing yourself. I began to nod off to the gentle rhythm of the wheels as I was pulled down a boulevard resplendent and blinking with Christmas decorations. So much depended on this one gesture, staying at ease until the event was over and all members had dispersed reluctantly and one awoke, not exactly refreshed, neither sad, not yet, a remnant of a former loneliness. This story wasn't a circular one, for exile was now a form of asylum in the eternal present tense, which even birds sought. Something had brought me here to a place where nothing ever happens, but nevertheless smells like it has been scrubbed with Clorox. I heard a whippoorwill whistle the sound of an O, followed by another O, and I looked up at the moon's tractor beam sucking dirt from the planet, and I heard O, then a gunshot. A hole torn in the soft static in my ears. Everything said here is either accurate or true. I turned a page and saw my parents, because I had continued to read into dawn, were dead. The sun lifted through the unfinished architecture, the morning a kind of triage, a worked-for disappointment you can believe in, you can lay hold of. I sat there for a moment surrounded by abandoned cars. A pond materialized on the hillside, filled with light and a black swan. Then my journal said, "Walk home now. I'm walking home now." Thank you, and thank you for having me.